Great. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for signing up and actually coming into the webinar. We hope you find it to be informative, both from an NSF SBIR point of view, but also from a Maine Technology Institute point of view, because MTI does provide technical assistance to companies, Maine companies that want to participate in the SBIR STTR program. So if you're not on mute, if you would, please go ahead and mute yourself. We'll get Ben to get his slides going. And as soon as, Ben, are you ready? You are on mute.
Okay, I should have my
slides
up
so
now.
ladies and gentlemen, I'm Karen West of the Maine Technology Institute. I am the lead SBIR consultant for MTI, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you Ben Schrag, who is a program director at the National Science Foundation. Ben, thank you for doing this. And could you please get us all started by giving us a little bit of your background, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everybody. Thank you, Karen. Thanks to MTI for the opportunity. I appreciate it. Thanks for all of you for taking some time out of a busy day. Yeah, so my background is that I've been at the NSF as a program director and various other things in the small business programs for the last 13 years. Prior to that, I was an entrepreneur at a technology startup in the Northeast doing semiconductor equipment. I did that for 6 years as a founder and also was a recipient of SBIR awards, including phase 1 and phase 2 from NSF. You want me to dive in, Karen, or?
Yes, please. Sorry.
Okay.
Go right ahead, Ben. Thank you.
I'm assuming you can see my slide, my cover slide here. If not, please someone put their hands up or yell at me. This is a pretty light set of slides. I think I have 10 slides here. Please feel free to interrupt, ask questions, or let me go deeper. I'm really going to focus on fit here rather than process. I want people to come away at least getting a sense about whether you might want to look into the program more and spend more time on trying to get you to understand the first steps you might need to take, rather than kind of diving into the depths of either how to apply or, you know, the advantages and the kind of processes and during the program. I'm happy to talk about that. Feel free to ask questions, but I want to make sure I don't go over anybody's head here. Yeah, I work for the National Science Foundation. We are a federal agency. All the programs in the SBIR world are parts of different federal government agencies that do research and development funding. Here at the NSF, most of what my agency does is basic research, which is to say, giving money to folks who want to explore the universe and learn about biology, geology, astronomy, physics, chemistry, and so on. That's about an $8.5 billion budget that we have per year. And as I said, most of that goes back out to scientists and engineers exploring the universe. I sit in a small part of NSF that's slightly different. I'm going to talk about what we do here today. We are about almost a $250 million program here at the NSF. And our goal is really to help not make discoveries, but to translate the fruits of discoveries into products and services for commercial impact. So we're trying to take things off the shelf of the lab and get them into the market. My program here is centralized. We have one building here. We're mostly working from home, but we are a very close-knit program. All the folks who work in the SBIR program here at NSF essentially were hired to do this one thing well. This is the one program we work on. We work with small businesses. We try to help entrepreneurs be successful. And so all of us, myself and 12 other colleagues who also have the same role that I do, have been hired, all of us from the private sector, into the government to try to make good decisions about how to allocate this funding to get great impacts for the country. So the thing we look for when we hire program directors is this dual expertise. We all have technical expertise in our fields, typically speaking, PhDs in the scientific fields that we work on. And we also all have commercial expertise, which is to say we've been scientists, but we've also been either entrepreneurs or investors in deep technology startup companies. And so we have all been where many of you, I suspect, might be trying to get some new idea off the ground and into the hands of a customer, basically. So we basically allocate this $230 million to small businesses across the country. We do that through grants or cooperative agreements. I'm not going to go too much into the minutia of government funding, but the way that we give money out is in a very flexible format so that the money that we provide can be flexed and changed and modified as the companies we work with figure out what they're doing, change what they're doing, pivot, learn, grow. We want to be able to support them as they rapidly change. This is a phased program. You'll hear about 3 phases when you hear about SBIR. In NSF, really, there's only kind of 2 phases that are formal, and then the 3rd phase I can talk about. But phase 1 and phase 2 are the main things to worry about. With the funding we provide, if things go well, this adds up to about $2 million, spread out over several years, typically. The first phase being about a $275,000 award, and the 2nd phase starting at $1 million. At NSF, and this is very specific to us, right? So we are one agency that has SBIR. I suspect you may have heard from others, but at NSF, really the way to think about what our focus area is it's like the Department of Energy. They focus on energy projects for their SBIR program. The National Institutes of Health and their SBIR program, they focus on healthcare, human health. The way to think about NSF's focus is that we focus on startups. We focus on early stage, small firms. As you can see from the data here, our portfolio of companies that we fund is typically very small, very new companies. And we have a special affinity for first-time government grant seekers. And so most of the companies we fund every year are writing their first ever government grant to any agency. That's typically where we focus our attention. So I think we are, at least I experienced this when I was an entrepreneur, and I think it's become even more stark. We are really trying to be accessible to people who maybe don't know the government funding game very well. So one of the things that partners like MTI do for us is to help get the message out to people who maybe don't know what NSF is, don't know what the government grants are about, so that you can learn about it and compete. Even though we're funding very early stage, very risky companies, our program is very focused on commercialization. And this is a set of just news items about our portfolio companies over the last year or so. These are all companies typically many years past our funding. And so the goal here for us is to give you the first outside funding or early outside funding, let you get that very risky part of the technology in hand, kind of get that de-risked, get it working, and then move forward to the additional sources of funding, typically outside the federal government. As I mentioned, we'll provide up to $2 million. But for most of you who are developing these kind of science-based ventures or technology-based ventures, to make it really big, you need to raise a lot more money than that. And so typically the best path that we see is that companies will start with our funding. Sometimes they'll get other government agencies to jump in, but pretty quickly they're going to go and raise private capital. And so we see that over the last 6 years, we've put in about $1 billion into our portfolio across these different phases. At that same time, that same 6-year period, that portfolio has raised about $14 billion in follow-on funding. So this is about every dollar we put in is then matched later on by $14 on average of private funding. So this is where we want you to get. We want you to become rapidly scalable. We want you to be aggressive, to be ambitious, to really try to conquer, your market, to make huge impacts. That's the kind of high impact we're looking for. Okay. If you're not sure whether you're a good fit, here's the things we really look for in our program. We provide funding for research and development, technical research and development. That's what we pay for. We pay for lots of different things, but they'll have to be in the service of some R&D task. And so if your product does not have that kind of technically risky, technically innovative aspect, if it's something you can just build through straightforward engineering, or if your product is already developed and proven, you may not be a good fit for us because we can't pay for some of those other things you may need funding for. You should only really think about us if you need to basically make sure technology is working in some way to move your company forward. And in most cases, we're looking to demonstrate, in the first phase of funding, we're looking for you to use our funding to demonstrate what we call technical feasibility. Will this product work at all, basically? Usually what that means is if you have a new risky unproven technology, if it's yours alone, if it's unique, you are the only people, you're the only company that has that secret sauce, that patented or patentable technology. We want to see that you're going to be able to build a defensible position in the market based on the fact that you have this special silver bullet secret sauce that nobody else can use, right? Hopefully your product is different and will be 10 times better than what else is out there, right? That's the type of thing that we really look for. We find that if we do, for these companies that are able to do the research and get to a proven product and do difficult things to make it work, that's a really great barrier to entry for competitors. Where, you know, even if they wanted to copy you, they can't figure out how to make it work, or they're not allowed to use the technology you've built. So we want to see how your technology is a real big defensibility for you. We're looking for companies that have that are using our funding in the service of this larger goal of aggressive commercialization, right? If what's in your heart, what the number one thing you get up in the morning to try to do is to do research, tinker in the lab, that's great. That you may not be a good fit for us. We're hoping that what you get up in the morning trying to do is to try to grow a great company, get a product into the market, and solve problems for customers. And what that will mean is that, you know, early on, you may need to be spending some of your time as a company doing R&D, but that later, once the technology is working and the product is proven, you're going to be spending most of your time doing non-technical things, you know, selling, marketing, creating channels and customers, that sort of thing. Finally, we want to see in service of that aggressive commercial vision that you are starting to put in some work to understand your beachhead market and your beachhead customer. And basically to try to convince us that, you know, whatever new technology you're developing that the world has never seen has the potential to line up with a customer who's got a need that they cannot meet. And so this is really about customer discovery. We have various versions of the I-Core program that NSF offers. I know there's some in the Northeast. I'm not sure if there's any directly in Maine, but if you're interested in customer discovery, I recommend you look into I-Core. There are lots of different opportunities to get involved. It's also something that you can just you can do by yourself. The I-Core is basically adopted from the private sector, from a guy named Steve Blank, and most of the way to kind of do customer discovery, the best practices are out there in the public domain. I suggest anybody who has not heard about that or read about that, who is looking to try to understand their customers, that they take a look at that. I think it's the best way we've found to kind of apply a systematic process to customer understanding. I'm not going to go too much into all these examples, but just so you get a sense of the types of companies that we fund, I'll give you a couple sentences on 6 different companies here. The common threads among these companies are, number one, they were basically based on new discoveries, new innovations. That was what kind of formed the core of the company. Number two, they were all funded very early on, typically at fewer than most of these. I think all these companies were less than 5 employees when we first funded them. Number three, that they've kind of aggressively gone toward the market. And number four, that they are now emerging success stories where their technology actually is solving an important problem, thereby allowing the company to create revenues. Top left here is a company called Ecovative Design. This is a company that grows a replacement for styrofoam packing materials. This is based on agricultural waste. It's basically a part of the mushroom root structure called mycelium, and it's something you can grow that has similar properties to styrofoam, but it does not sit in landfills for 500 years the way that styrofoam does. It's something that once you're done with your Amazon package, you throw it into the landfill or into your garden, and it decomposes. So it's a biodegradable packing foam that's got no petroleum. The lower left is a company called Diligent Robotics. This is a company that has a robotic assistant that works in hospitals alongside care providers. Technology spun out of the University of Texas. This company during COVID launched their robots in several hospitals and basically was able to try to take some of the burden off of the caregiving staff and let them use their time for kind of higher value added activities. So the robot basically assists by gathering supplies and things like that. The middle is a company called Unspun. I don't think a video plays here, but this is a manufacturing company where they're actually able to 3D print jeans, like blue jeans, based on your personal measurements. So it's a way to kind of make clothing without the waste that is associated with the way that blue jeans are produced currently. It also allows the clothing to be customized to your specific measurements, which I think is for many people a really important feature. The bottom is a company called Ginkgo Bioworks. This is a company that went public, I think, a year and a half ago. They are listed on the NYSE as the ticker DNA. They're about a $16 billion IPO when they went public. And it's a company that engineers organisms to basically act as little manufacturing factories for various kinds of things, including chemicals and medicines. They were one of the companies that was that helped to increase the output of the COVID vaccine production when the vaccine was being rolled out. I think that their CEO was on 60 Minutes, and he talked about how they were able to triple the amount of vaccine that they were able to get out of that process. 1000 Eyes at the top right is a cybersecurity firm. This is a software company that provides basically new ways to analyze networks to detect and prevent intrusions. It's a product that is now used by a large percentage of the Fortune 500 companies to protect their internal networks. It was bought out by Cisco last year, I believe. And finally, the lower right is Silent Nanotechnologies. This company has a new kind of battery for electric vehicles. They have been backed by a lot of venture investment now and have partnerships with a number of automakers. Their first batteries are going to go into Mercedes vehicles later this year, allowing greater range for electric vehicles. So again, the goal here is that there's a wide variety of technical areas that we support, and that the outcome here is tangible effects in the economy where the taxpayer and the consumer can really feel like a problem is being solved. Oh, there is the video. I can't show it. So this is the Unspun video in the center here, 3D printing of genes. Okay, 2 more slides, and then I'm happy to take questions. Here's a few things for you not to worry about. I think sometimes these are things that maybe at other agencies become important. We tend to try to not sweat the small stuff for a lot of these early stages of the process. A lot of agencies worry a lot about topics. We don't have a big focus on topics. There's really no topic that doesn't fit. We don't reject any application for lack of topic. I will talk about how you can learn more about where you fit, but don't worry about topics at the beginning here. Is my project of interest NSF? We don't have any kind of specific internal interest other than, as I mentioned, really trying to support startups. Other agencies may have internal folks who have specific technologies or specific products that they really feel like are important to use to develop or to support. We don't have that. We really try to make this something where we give that freedom back to you as the entrepreneur about what you think you're passionate about doing with your company. How do I do things with my budget? Don't worry about budgets. Budgets do not become selection criteria. A company's never submitted a grant proposal before. That's okay. That probably means, in general, companies that have not submitted a proposal before actually have a slightly higher award rate than companies that have. And so you're actually in a privileged class if you've never submitted proposals to NSF before. What if I make some minor administrative error? There's very few administrative errors that you can make that will get your proposal rejected. We do have things that we need you to fix sometimes. So many companies that submit proposals will be contacted after the fact to make some changes to fix things in their proposal. But there's only about 1 or 2% of proposals that we receive that are rejected due to administrative reasons. So do your best, but don't worry too much about the administration. Finally, my lead investigator does not have some kind of specific academic pedigree. That's okay. We are less picky about the specific nature of the principal investigator than others. We are funding cutting edge research, and so we do need to see that you're team that you've put together as a whole has the technical expertise to carry out the work. But whether that resides with a PI or somebody else or a collaborator is very much up to you. We have kind of there's 4 steps here, but really there's two stages in our application process, which are on the slide as steps 2 and 3, the project pitch and then the full proposal. I recommend that you not worry about the full proposal until the project pitch is behind you. Project pitch is something you can submit anytime. You don't need to do any government registrations. It's through our website. It's a 2 or 3 page of information, and it's something that we'll respond to in up to a month, but the typical response time is around 1 to 2 weeks. The project pitch is really just getting enough information to see whether we think what you're working on might be a good fit. And so the answers you can get when you submit this project pitch are maybe or no. If it's maybe or if it's no, we're going to give you feedback. And especially if we're telling you that this project pitch is not a good fit, we're going to tell you why. If you are considered potentially a good fit, we're going to give you an invitation and some feedback, and then you would then be able to submit a full proposal anytime in the year that followed that invitation. I'm not going to talk about the full proposal. It does take a fair amount of effort. It's a little bit cumbersome. And the review process for the full proposal is a 5 to 6 month process. And so our process is not fast. Important to understand that. You can learn more about these steps. This is a screenshot from our website, seedfund.nsf.gov. Feel free to go to that site. You can click on each of these and learn more. Anything really about the program you can find at the Seed Fund site. So feel free to take a look. And again, this 3-page project pitch is accepted anytime. If you do get invited to submit a full proposal, that second step, we have submission windows. One is closing later this month, and so most of you who are new to the program probably are going to be too fast to submit in June, but you could also target the October window for the full proposal. After October, we'll probably have a new solicitation later this year or maybe early next year that will have multiple windows in 2023 as well. Okay, that's what I got. I'm happy to take questions or clarify anything that I missed.
Great, Ben. Thank you very much. Wow, a lot of information in a short period of time, right? So Ben, one of the questions in the chat, and please, if you do have questions for Ben, don't hesitate to put them in there, and then we'll get to them and also maybe some in-person type questions. One of the first questions that George asked was, what do you mean by deep technology?
Yeah, so deep technology, there's a bunch of different definitions, and even the term deep technology there's a few different terms that have been kind of coined. My definition for deep technology is that your whatever product or service you're developing is based on either a new scientific discovery or a new meaningfully different engineering innovation. And so it means that there's some characteristics that associate with that. Number one is, again, that there's some new discovery that enables this new product. Number two is that this new product has not been reduced to practice yet, basically, or at least at the stage we're looking for. Number three is that typically it's the type of technology that is defensible. If you make it work, then you can stop other people from making it work. It's not a commodity. It's not something everybody could do. And then for our program, we're also looking for technical risk, right? So this is, we're looking for deep technology, and we're looking for you to, at phase 1, to have significant technical risk. And technical risk means it's possible that even despite an unlimited amount of time and money to make the product, to develop the product, there may be something that stops you from making it work in the way you need to, right? There may be some law of nature or something like that that prevents the product from actually working the way it needs to, right? So there's this kind of existential risk in the technology. If you can say that I know that qualified people can make this product work 100% for sure, there's no doubt about that, that's actually something that's not risky enough for our program. We need to see that kind of technical bleeding edge.
Great, good. Let's see. George says, thank you. Evan says, if we have all of our info already collected and prepped from other application programs, how realistic is that we can submit the pitch and get everything in by the end of June? In other words, if we get the proposal in time, will we hear back from the pitch in time to submit the full application?
You might. I think program directors try to be pretty fast about responding to pitches this time of year. We're kind of a few weeks out from the deadline, but there's no guarantee. The more important thing is that some of the registrations you need to be able to submit the full proposal, which are outside of our control, some of them can take quite a while. If you said it sounds like you've applied to other agencies, maybe that means you've gone through, say, the SAM.gov process, which is government-wide. If you've gone through that, then you have a shot, I think. The one thing that I would say is that, writing the documents can be done pretty quickly. Our process probably requires more level of customer engagement and discovery than other agencies. And so if you've applied to other agencies, if you've really spent time thinking about and talking to your market, then you may be ready. But if you haven't done that yet, it may be hard to do that in the time you need to. And again, that's not a formal requirement to submit, but it is something that is, if you haven't done it, it's a little hard to be competitive in our process. Our folks are extremely commercially focused. But yeah, you could definitely try. Worst thing that happens if you submit a pitch now and you can't get it together is you still have an open invitation and you can target October.
Great, thank you. Catherine asks, I see the project's PI, tech lead, must be legally employed at least 20 hours a week by the company seeking funding. How does this work if you are doing a project in partnership with a university? We have an interesting scenario where our co-founder also works for university.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, working with university, I'm not sure how that interacts with the requirement for primary employment. I guess it sounds like the question maybe is that the person you want to be the PI has a full-time job at a university. And if that's the case, then, this is a rule handed down by Congress. And so you need to figure out a way to either have that person step away from the university in order to satisfy this primary employment requirement, or to find somebody else to be the PI. And to be very honest, if the person who's essential to your company has a full-time day job, for now that's okay, but later on that's going to be an issue anyway, because in order to be successful, we find that the founders of the company pretty quickly have to be making the company their full-time or their primary professional priority. You can't lead a startup to success in your spare time, in my experience. So part of the value of having the PI be primary employed is that it does kind of force the commitment level that you need anyway. But if I missed your question, the premise of your question, I'm happy to have you re-ask it or to have you reach out to me under separate cover.
Right. So that brings in a couple more questions along those lines. Now, the principal investigator's employment with the small business is at time of award, not at time of submission of the
That's right.
proposal,
Yeah.
correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that gives the person 4 to 6 months to kind of get their ducks in a row to become the PI, if you will. All right, so the other question has been, we've not done a whole lot of talking about the STTR program.
Yes.
And the division of work between, because obviously if these companies are startups, they don't have all of the technical experience or expertise that they need. So can you talk about that and the relationship with research institution and subcontractors?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And yeah, I definitely intentionally have not talked about that distinction because I think it's not as important as it seems for other agencies. But yeah, so the STTR program I haven't mentioned, it is a parallel program. It's smaller, but it basically everything I said applies to both of those programs. At the NSF, the two programs have essentially been made identical, other than the one big difference, which is the definitional difference between these two programs. The STTR program, STTR stands for Small Business Technology Transfer. And the term technology transfer basically implies that the STTR proposal requires that the small business work with a research institution, and that's defined as a kind of a not-for-profit research performing institution. So colleges and universities would qualify, and maybe some other not-for-profits. But the idea there is that a lot of times the discovery, as you indicated, Karen, or maybe the expertise that you need early on, lies at some other non-for-profit organization that has maybe the IP, or maybe has personnel or facilities that are necessary. And so the STTR program does require this partnership. It requires that a certain percentage of the budget go to that research institution, and the two entities will work together. The small business is always the prime organization, but the university could have as much as 60% of the budget in that case. SBIR allows for that sort of thing. You can have an SBIR proposal, you can work with the university, you can give them a subaward, you can involve their folks, but it's optional, right? You don't have to do that. And so the way I would think about these two programs at NSF is, don't worry about it at first. Think about the market, think about the product, think about the customer, and then based on that, think about, okay, what work needs to be done to demonstrate that this product is feasible. If some of that work makes sense to outsource to a partner, whether it's a university or somebody else, then in some cases an STTR might make sense. In some cases an SBIR might. We're happy to talk about that budgetary distinction. It's not something you probably need to worry about until after the project pitch stage. But yeah, basically based on where you think the budget would fit, if a bunch of that money needs to go to the university because that's the best way to get the work done, then an STTR would naturally be the better choice. If maybe some percentage of it, but maybe not more than a third, needs to go to a university, or maybe the money needs to go to maybe another for-profit, for example. In that case, an SBIR would be the better choice. But yeah, we encourage these types of collaborations if it's in the best interest of kind of the work that you proposed.
Great, thank you. And that's a good segue to another question by George. Can you talk about markers for structure and staffing accepted as suitable for commercialization by NSF? What indicators is NSF looking for?
So I would say, there's a few things we look at when we look at the company and the team. First of all, as I said, startups are absolutely fine. That's a lot of what we fund. If your company does have a track record, we're going to look at what you've done. And if your company is 5 or 10 years old, it'd be good for us to understand what you've been doing. Have you tried to do this before? Did it work? And so, track records are not required, but if they exist, we look at them. If you've gotten federal funding, or if you've gotten private investment, we want to see, what you've done with that funding, because that's probably the best way to decide what we think might happen when you take our funding. Beyond track record, if your company is brand new, we're going to look really at what you've been doing, even if you're 6 months old. What have you been doing in those 6 months? If you've been, doing something else, we're gonna wonder, okay, well, they've been focused on something else. Are they going to change what they're doing? Are they going to be focused here? Are they trying to do multiple things at once, which is hard for a small company? So we look at focus as a big thing for small companies. We look at structure in the sense of making sure that if you do have a small team, that at the very least that the team that you have that's going to actually put in the hours is passionate and motivated and good, right? In some sense, the best thing we can see is that if you've got 2 employees, that those 2 employees are getting up and this is what they do all day, right? Or 1 employee and this is what they do all day. We've seen lots of different structures work, lots of small companies be successful. The one thing that we really don't see is that companies are successful with a part-time entrepreneur at the helm. So you can start doing this part-time, but pretty quickly, every company that's really significantly successful finds somebody with a clear calendar, puts the reins in that hand, or the one or more people who have a clear calendar, gives them the equity incentive to work hard, gives them the control of the company, and lets them run with it. That's basically the best structure to have. And so what we don't like to see is, somebody who owns a majority of the company is off here doing something else and not really focusing their full attention on the company, or somebody with control, that sort of thing. So there's no pedigree for a person, but we want to see that if you're in, you're in, and those who are in have the autonomy to move the company.
Great. Ben, question for you. How does NSF view a virtual company, since so much of the work being done, obviously during the pandemic, most everyone was virtual. And many companies are finding, especially if they're in the data world, if you will, developing applications and working in IT, they're getting their expertise. They might be in Maine, but they're getting their expertise in California, Arizona. How does NSF view virtual companies?
Yeah, great question. It's topical. So
Yeah.
in order to apply, as I mentioned, in order to even get into our system to submit the full proposal, you need to get a what's called a sam.gov registration. It's the government system that anyone asking for government money anywhere in the federal government has to register in. They're going to ask you some questions, and I think they require the company to have a physical address. But my point is that they may have some requirements here. If you can get past their requirements and get them to give you registration and then apply, I think we're fine with virtual companies, assuming that you're able to meet their requirements. Obviously, as we all know, in COVID, there's advantages to being able to work virtually in terms of hiring people in different places. There's some disadvantages too, maybe in terms of culture, being able to establish company culture. And so we hope that you'll weigh those things and try to compensate if there's any weaknesses and take advantage of the strengths. But I think we're pretty flexible about that. So the only thing obviously is that if you are not a software company and you have a physical piece of hardware, sometimes the person you hire needs to be in front of the workbench working with the hardware, right? So virtual is great, but we do understand that 75% of the companies we fund are working with something physical. And you can do some of your work virtually, but eventually you need someone to be at a fume hood or at a wet bench, or hammering on a piece of metal somewhere. So obviously within the constraints of what you're doing, choose accordingly.
Good. So we'll take, I think we have one more question, and then we'll take a few minutes and we'll talk about the Maine Technology Institute's Technical Assistance Program. So one more question for you, Ben. Let's see, where did it go? How technical does the pitch have to be in providing details of the secret sauce?
So the pitch usually is something where you can give us what we need without giving us anything proprietary. The pitch is treated proprietary. We don't ever make it public. It's treated with the same amount of confidentiality as anything else you submit to us, but you don't probably need to tell us anything that you would feel as sensitive and to make the point. The most important thing to do in the pitch is to make sure you don't just focus on the nail, but you talk about the hammer a little bit too, right? A lot of people are basically spend a lot of time talking about the problem they're going to solve and the features of the product. They don't tell us how they're going to do it, right? So you do need some few sentences about, okay, what's different about your technical approach, right? So to give you an example, the NSF funded a company called Interlace that developed laser eye surgery in the 90s. This is an SBIR award that phase 1, phase 2 award we made in the 90s. You can imagine laser eye surgery. You could imagine somebody submitting a project pitch and saying, look, we're going to fix people's eyesight. We're going to do it in a way that doesn't have as many side effects. It's going to have all these benefits. You haven't told us what you're doing and what's special about the way you're doing it yet. So what we want to know is, we're going to shoot a laser at your eyeball, right? That's basically the unique approach. And telling somebody you're going to use a laser to ablate the cornea, that is something that I think is not proprietary. It didn't necessarily give away the real secret sauce behind the laser guides technique, right? But it would give us enough information to say, oh, that's a different approach to fixing someone's eyesight, right? I mean, before then, the only way that people fix people's eyesight is they actually used a scalpel to cut your eye. And so just saying you're using a laser is a very clear, obvious difference in approach, right? So when you submit your project pitch, you do want to give us some sense about what you're doing is unique and novel and risky. And obviously with laser eye surgery, that jumps out immediately as soon as you tell them you're using a laser. But whatever you can do to kind of convey that in a non-proprietary way is great. And if you don't give us enough detail there and we need more proprietary information, we have an option to come back and ask you for more information. But make sure you put in something there that is not just a list of features and benefits and kind of apple pie and puppies and rainbows, right? We want to see not just what you're doing, but how you're going to do it, because that's the thing that differentiates. Everybody wants to save lives and fix the climate and things like that. What's important is not that you're doing that. It is important, but what's important to us at this stage is, how are you doing that differently? That's the important thing. So make sure that you talk about that.
Great. And there's one more question that came in that I think is important, because Jessica was asking, and this a little bit in the weeds with when we're talking about the budget, but her question is what about payment to any foreign research institutions if they are providing a base IP?
Yeah, so SBIR has pretty strict rules around sending funds outside the country. It is a congressionally mandated program, and they've put some limitations on where the money can be spent. Typically, you're not allowed to spend any of our money outside the U.S., and that would include collaborating with a foreign institution. There are potentially waivers that we can give, but they're pretty rare, and it would have to be a circumstance where there's just no other institution in the United States that could possibly do the work, for example. You mentioned getting IP from a foreign source. It's absolutely fine to have IP from a foreign source be part of your company and to apply for this program. We typically don't pay directly for licensing fees for IP, right? If you need to just pay somebody to get access to IP, that's not R&D, and so we technically wouldn't pay for that. And so in some sense, that would mean we're not telling you who you can pay because we're not paying for it anyway. But I'm happy to kind of explore the specific case with you offline, because I think a lot of these are very case by case. So
Sure.
Feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Great. Okay, Ben, thank you. Can you stay on while we go through and do the MTI presentation, and then
I can stick around till noon. Yeah, absolutely.
There'll be some time. Great. So hopefully I'm going to be able to do this without too much angst.
Stop sharing here. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. All right. So we'll get this into slideshow. Okay, great. So to those of you new to Maine or the Maine Technology Institute, MTI, as it's known, has a fairly strong SBIR STTR support program. We call it TAP, Technical Assistance Program, and it consists of a team of SBIR experts, if you will, in at least 4 or 5 different areas. So MTI's TAP program helps Maine small businesses write competitive SBIR STTR proposals. And the way the program works is MTI pays the consultants to work with the small businesses. So the small business gets this service free of charge. And this is just a really tall overview of what services that a company can access through the MTI TAP program. We try to surround the company with the expertise needed to ensure that they can write a strong proposal. So it's outreach, it's proposal development, it's commercialization strategy, it's planning, it's reviewing. We have a government accountant who assists in developing the indirect rate, budget justification. Plus, once a company gets an award, Stan Gavitt, who's our government consultant, will actually go in and help you set up the books to ensure that you're compliant with federal requirements. I'm Karen West. I am the lead consultant. So I do the overview, the workshops, the seminars, proposal development with you. I don't do the writing, but I do an awful lot of editing and reviewing. We have proposal strategy sessions. We have a lot of technical editing, for many people, this is the first time that companies have actually put their idea and their technology on paper. So we help you refine it and get it written to a strong scientific level. We help you with the forms, because there's always the forms when we are doing SBIR or any sort of federal work. We have an expert, Suzanne Hamlin of Transformative Knowledge. She helps with commercialization planning, strategy and development. We have a market researcher that will help with doing secondary research into the market, customers, and competition. So we have a pretty strong program, and we support both phase 1 and phase 2 applications. So in phase 1, you get about 10 hours from everyone, a little more from me because I'm with you from intake all the way to submission. And then in phase 2, everybody gets 20 hours plus of each person's time. So how do you apply to work with Maine's TAP team? There is an intake form that you need to submit under mainetechnology.org. You don't necessarily meet with a TAP team member. I mean, we'll have an initial SBIR discovery call, but you know, given COVID, we've been doing most of this virtually now. And by the way, this program, this TAP support, can help you write your project pitch. And that's important because that's your first presentation to NSF. So don't think you have to write your pitch and get the invitation first. We can help you write the pitch. I will work with you to identify one or more agencies that will meet your technology, if you will. As Ben said, other agencies are a little more focused on whether or not your technology meets their needs. And Ben has, you know, the NSF has very strong topic areas, but some of them, the other agencies, of which there are 11, have very focused topics. So registrations, long pole in the tent, starting with, you know, sam.gov, and then there's sbir.gov, and then there's also the agency's portal that you're going to have to submit the proposals with. sam.gov registration is taking 3 to 4 weeks right now. So if you don't have that in place, you cannot submit without it. There are no waivers that I'm aware of that have been issued. So you'll develop the proposal, you'll gather letters of support, you know, by talking to customers while you're writing your proposal or beforehand. So it's incumbent upon these companies to be talking to potential customers and investors, thought leaders, even before they're writing their phase 1. It used to be back in the day in the early 90s, you know, that commercialization was not a strong focus in these proposals. And companies could wait until they were in phase 2 or later before they really talk to customers. And that's not the case anymore. So we'll help you develop the proposal. We'll do an iterative review process. Suzanne and I will on the commercialization sections, and maybe even some of the technical if you've got some economic development or I don't want to say economic development, cost benefit analysis type work being proposed in the proposal, and then we'll help you submit it. So the funding, phase 1, phase 2, we've kind of talked about this. This phase 1 on average, national success rate is 12 to 17%, sometimes going up to 20%. And then in phase 2, because you're competing against other phase 1 awardees, success rate goes 40 to 50%. So it's a good program. So I just want to briefly touch on SBIR's STTR awards in Maine. I have been the lead consultant with MTI since 1999. Cut my teeth on the program, Silicon Valley in the early 90s. So, you know, we have a strong program here. And right now we're at $136 million. And all companies within Maine, or excuse me, small businesses in Maine have received awards. And that includes even up in Aroostook County or any of the other rim counties. So we have some pretty good statistics here. And what we've found is that when companies work with MTI's TAP team, because of the expertise the team has, that they tend to do better in the awards, in receiving awards. So it's always good news. Very quickly, 2020 SBIR Tibbetts awardee is Rockstep Solutions. He worked with the National Institutes of Health. Unar Lab has worked with NSF. He's doing great work getting proposals. He submitted not only to NSF, but also now has additional work in to prove efficacy through the National Institutes of Health. So Hari's business is doing great, and he's going to be one of our rock stars, if you will. Introspective Solutions, They do a lot of work with Department of Energy, and they look at fractal graphs and distribution and very scientific stuff that is kind of beyond my league, if you will, but they've been very successful. And what's beautiful about what they've been able to do is take this highly technical work and allow it to where most people can understand it at one level or another, the very technical or to the business savvy. And that's what's important. Montalvo is an example again of an NSF awardee. Now, I think Ben mentioned early on that most of the awards go to companies of 2 to 9 employees. And a small business, as defined by the SBA, is 500 employees or less. And Montalvo is a company that had approximately 50 employees when they applied, and got turned down first time because, you know, they are engineers and they were making it seem safe and easy. And as you heard Ben say, he wants risk. So they got turned down because it sounded just like an engineering exercise. They retooled, resubmitted, we worked with them, and they subsequently won a phase 1, follow-on phase 2, and then a phase 2B. And they're kind of the anomaly in that they have 50 employees. So they're larger than most SBIR awardees, at least in Maine. But the difference is they were moving their technology into a whole new field. And so it opened up new revenues, new opportunities, new employment, you know, hires, et cetera. That was good to see. All right, next step, learn more about SBIR.gov, network, talk to me. My contact information will be at the end of this slide. By the way, you will receive an email from me letting you know that this will this recorded webinar will be available through MTI's website. Okay, just some steps of getting started. Registrations, pull together your team. If you don't have the expertise, you've got to figure out where you're going to get it. And you can pay for not only your labor in a phase 1, phase 2, but also your subcontractors or your consultants, your subject matter experts. All right, so that's it. One of the things that I don't have on this is the opportunity outside of the SBIR program offered by the Maine Technology Institute. And so the Maine Technology Institute, mainetechnology.org, is an organization that was founded in 1999 to support really, it says 7 technology sectors, but they offer many, many opportunities to get your technology into one of those sectors and get it funded. Everything that MTI funds requires a 1-to-1 match, and that can be both cash or in-kind labor. Cash is king, of course. And the beautiful thing about working with MTI and an investment officer there and with me is that, let's say you get a phase 1 award, well, you can apply to MTI for matching funds and I'm sorry, for MTI funding to support the business development activities that NSF won't pay for. And you can use the NSF phase 1 or phase 2 as match. So it's a great synergy. It keeps moving things forward. MTI offers awards through a variety of ranges, from range 1, which is startups, all the way to companies who have are scaling, ready to scale, and are looking for additional money. They are also hosting and managing several federal and state programs. So if you're not familiar with MTI, I encourage you to do so, mainetechnology.org. And if you want to talk to an investment officer at MTI, then all you need to do is go to the mainetechnology.org website and complete an intake form. Just like you have to for SBIR, you need to do an intake form for MTI support. I think I'm going to stop there. It's 11:55. Joe asked the question, is this MTI service only for Maine residents? Yes, it is. This is a private, MTI is a private, what is it, public-private partnership with the state. So it is state taxpayer dollars that are funding the efforts of the Maine Technology Institute. So yes, it is set aside strictly for MTI companies. However, if you're planning to move to Maine and you establish your business in Maine, as you're transitioning into being a Maine-based business, I believe MTI will work with you on that. And now I'd like to go ahead and open it up to questions again for both Ben and I. Ben, are you still there?
I am.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions? A lot of times, these webinars are like, what do I want to say? Drinking from a fire hose might be a good way to say it. And it does take some effort to learn the program and get familiar with it. And on MTI's website, under what we fund, there's a few pages there that says federal funding assistance. And what you're going to find is an overview, a general overview of the SBIR STTR program, and then various webinars put on by the National Science Foundation. We just had one last month from the USDA. And so there are other resources listed there as well. So I encourage you to look at that website. I encourage you to look at the NSF website, seedfund.nsf.gov. There's a wealth of information there. And what I like is that NSF has put links there as to what's been funded in the past, because I think it's important to see how you should position your company and your technology to fit what MTI wants to, or what NSF wants to fund. Ben, any final thoughts from you?
No, I just thanks to everybody, and I would love to have you all reach out to me directly if there's any questions you have or anything I can do.
Excellent, excellent. I want to thank you, Ben, for agreeing to do this. Are you going to be at the National SBIR conference next week?
On Monday only, yeah, I'll be around. So say
only.
hi if you're there. Yeah.
Excellent, will do. I'm not sure if all of you folks are familiar with the National SBIR conference. You can find out more about it from the federal SBA website, sbir.gov. And at some point, you should consider attending. It's a great way to network and to learn and get immersed in all of the 11 federal agencies, SBIR STTR program. On that note, again, Ben, thank you to our attendees. Thank you so much for being a part of this, asking the questions. We certainly hope you found it of value. My contact information, I believe, is in the chat. You'll also get a copy of that as well, along with the slides. So we look forward to talking with you at some point. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.